Hey guys, just working on some of my gear here, getting everything lined up and ready for the climb and just camping in general, wintertime operations. So here I've got wool long johns and wool upper base layer, and then both merino wool, then cotton to go over that. And the idea is that the cotton will pull the moisture away from the body, while the wool will provide a bit of a buffer between the moisture in the cotton and in my body. And then so basically 2 pants, 2 shirts, and then wool pants with canvas pants on the outside of them for when it gets a little bit colder, and a wool shirt. So this will be my main winter setup here. And then as we increase or decrease in temperature, I've got a wool shawl neck sweater, cardigan type sweater. And one thing that I like to do, aside from my base layers, everything after my base layer, I like to have it so that it buttons down the front. So that's a button style, it kind of looks like a lumberjack type shirt. And then this cardigan buttons all the way down the front. And the reason I do that is so that I can regulate my temperature without taking all my layers off. Like as I'm changing tasks or whatever, and I need to do something and I'm getting warm, I don't want to have to stop, take a break, take all my layers off and change into different stuff. So I'll just unbutton, I'll unbutton my sweater to cool down a bit, and if I'm still hot, I'll unbutton that shirt. And the same goes for all of my other coats. I don't have any pullover stuff for my outer layers because it requires me to take off all my gear and my backpack and everything, and so it just wastes time. So I like to streamline my setup a little bit like that. Anyways, so as it gets even colder, and I haven't perfected this setup because these are brand new, and I've got to figure out how to hook them into my suspenders. If you look there, there's suspenders hooked into both of these pairs of pants, and these will need suspenders as well. So I'm gonna have to find a way to hook these belt loops into those suspenders, and so I haven't quite figured that out yet. Anyways, as it gets a little colder, I add another layer of wool on the outside. These are quite a bit more baggy, well, medium bagginess, I guess. These are pretty slim fit, slightly loose. This wool coat is like a wool pea coat style coat. It keeps me pretty warm. And then when it gets really cold, another pea coat to go over to the top of that one. And these, I think they're German, like old German military trousers. They're this really rough, thick type of wool. They're awesome. They're tough, really well made. And then and then I've got a couple stocking caps, but I may use those when it's not quite as cold. But as it gets colder, I've got chamois. This is a traditional chamois. It's cotton, and so that'll help when it's slightly cool. As it gets even colder, I made 2 wool chamois out of merino wool, and I also have this silk. They call it a wild rag, but it's the same, roughly the same dimensions as a chamois, and you can use it in the same way. But it's a cowboy style setup, but it's silk. And so that works well for the not quite as cold stuff. Then when it gets super cold, I'll do the wool head wraps, and then on top of those I've got a fur trapper hat and some goggles if it's windy. And then for my hand protection, I've got glommets. They're glove mitten combination, and if you don't know how they work, they just cut off. The fingers are cut off, and the thumb is cut open. so that you can use your fingertips for detailed work, or as it gets colder, you flip the mitten down over your hand. And these look different than most because I made a leather outer layer for them, because in the winters we have here, in one day it might be really cold in the morning, and then everything starts to melt by noon, and then it refreezes at night, and it drives me absolutely crazy. But this is to protect my wool mittens and keep them dry. It's just a water layer. It's leather. I made it out of a pair of gloves. Just chopped up some gloves and sewed this together as a cover so that everything is protected. So anyways, that's those. And then when it gets colder, I switch to the more Arctic style mitten. And these aren't even the warmest version of these. Up in the Arctic, they actually have fur on the outside too, and they're really warm. But these ones are super warm for anything I'll ever do, and they've got beaver fur on the inside, super warm. This is a fake hat. For now, this is what I'm using. I may get a wool version of it, or not wool, but a real fur version of this eventually, and it'll be super warm if that's the case. But I mean, with what I've got here, I can handle some pretty serious cold stuff just with this gear here. And I used to have a lot of synthetic layers because of the way they fit. They're comfortable and stuff. But I decided to switch everything out for wool because it outperforms most things, even a lot of synthetics, unless you spend like hundreds of dollars or something. I mean, this isn't a cheap setup here. It costs quite a bit, but I got everything for I got pretty good deals on most of this stuff, especially those pants and that sweater. I got a really good deal on both of those. The rest of this wool stuff, well, these weren't too expensive. These were, and that shirt was really expensive, but it's going to be worth it in the end. And then I've got some of my other gear here. These are my crampons. They're really big spikes that go on the bottom of your feet for climbing on in icy conditions like glaciers and stuff like that.